So good morning everyone, we are the Group 1 and today we are going to discuss the process of conducting research using quantitative and qualitative approaches. So the entire study of the quantitative research believes or shows that their study conveys an impersonal and objective tone, and they do not bring either their biases, their personal beliefs, and opinion in the study. They focus more on the data or the statistics that they have gathered. They use instruments to measure variables and they employ multiple statistical procedures just to make sure that their results are objective and that are true. Now, let's talk about the characteristics of a qualitative and the quantitative research in each of the 6 steps. So, conducting educational research is more than engaging in major steps in the process of research. The way that this unfolds and illustrate the flow of the research process, the researcher chooses either the qualitative or the quantitative research approach on their research track. So the problem, the questions, and the literature reviews help to steer the researcher towards either the qualitative or the quantitative track. So the procedure involved in them are such as sampling, data gathering or data collection, instruments and protocols and procedures, and the data analysis and the final interpretation of results. Now, let us move on to the flow of the research process through qualitative and quantitative research. We don't have a chart, but we can still do this. So, first is of course your research problem, and then your literature review, your research questions, and upon conducting your research question, this is the time that you will be able to know on which track you'll be in, whether in quantitative or in. Let's move on to the quantitative research characteristics. So there are 6 of them. The first one is when you are describing research problem through a description trends or the need of an explanation the relationship among variables. So when you are describing trends, means that the research problem can be answered by a best study in which the researcher seeks to establish overall tendency of responses from individuals and to note how this tendency varies among people. For example, we might seek how to learn how the voters describe their attitudes towards bond issues. Results from this study can be informed how a large population view the issue as the diverse of these views, having diverse views. Second is that we are looking or providing major roles of literature through suggesting the research questions to be asked and justifying research problem. Here, we looking for literature review in our research. You are typically in you will typically be seeing substantial literature review at the beginning of the study. So the literature plays a major role and it has 2 ways. First is that it is justifying the need of the research problem and suggesting a potential purpose and research questions for the study. Second, it is justifying the research problem means that you use this literature document and the importance of the issue that is examined in the study. The third one is the quantitative research questions. This is where you ask specific, narrow questions to obtain measurable, observable, and data on variables. So the major statements and questions of direction in the study, the purpose statement, the research question, and the hypothesis are the specific and narrow because you identify only few variables to study. So here, you're going to predict parental involvement. Example, if this is your study. They state their purpose of the study of the major research questions, and then they say that they will examine 4 factors that influence parental involvement if your study is about parental involvement, home, and school. And then they identify the 4 factors that they predict will influence this statement or which of these involvement. The next one is the data collection. So the data collection, this is where you use instrument to measure variables in the study. An instrument is a tool for measuring, observing, or documenting quantitative data, and it contains specific questions and response possibilities that you establish to develop in advance of the study. So, examples of instruments can be survey questionnaires, standardized tests, and checklists that you might use to observe a student's or a teacher's behavior depending on who are your respondents, let's say. Next, we have the quantitative data analysis. This is where you analyze the data using mathematical procedures or statistics. These analyses consist of breaking down the data into parts to answer research questions. So, statistical procedures such as comparing groups or asking questions or looking for questions, comparing groupings or relating scores of individuals provide information to address the research questions and hypotheses. You then interpret the results of this analysis in a light of essential predictions or depending on your prior studies. The last quality or the quantitative research characteristics is that you need to look for or you need to create a research report which is standard, and this research is the overall format of this, or this reporting and evaluating is the overall format for a study that follows predictable pattern. First is introduction, review of the literature, methods, results, and the discussion. This form creates a standardized structure for qualitative studies, and in addition, it is also a specific criteria. It also includes specific criteria that you might use to judge the quality of the quantitative research results or the report. So for example, you examine a quantitative study to see if it has extensive literature review, tests good research questions and hypotheses, uses rigorous experimental data collections and procedures, or if it applies appropriate statistical procedures and forms interpretation that naturally follows from the data that you have collected. And or one of the purpose of using this instrument is for you to prove that the value of the data that you get are very realistic, and the scores that you use or the scores that you have gathered are valid. You design studies to control for all variables, and you might introduce bias into the study. And finally, your report or your research report, without referring to your personal take or personal reaction, everything is based on statistics. Let's move on to the qualitative research characteristics. So number one characteristics of a qualitative research is that it is exploring a problem and developing a detailed understanding of a central phenomenon. So a central phenomenon is the key concept or the idea or process studied in the qualitative research. The research problem of difficulty in teaching children who are deaf requires both an exploration, because we need to know better how we can teach or how we will teach these children, and then understanding, because of its complexity, the process of teaching deaf learners. Second is having literature review play a minor role, but it justifies the problem as well. So in qualitative research, the literature review plays a less substantial role at the beginning of the study. In qualitative research, although you may review a literature to justify the need to study the research problem that you have or that you present, the literature does not provide major direction for the researcher for the research question. The reason for this is that qualitative research relies more on the views of the participants or your respondents sa inyong study, and then less on the direction identified in the literature by the researcher. Next is you're going to state the purpose and the purpose of your research, and then you have your questions and in a broad way as to the participants' experiences. So the purpose statement and the research questions are stated so that you can best learn from the participants. You, as a researcher, need a single phenomenon to enter or to single phenomenon of interest and state this problem in a purpose statement. Also, these question focuses on understanding single idea, being a professional. Let's say like if professionalism is your study, and then responses to it will yield to the qualitative data such as quotations. So what will your respondents will say, like a quotation, and then if they answer you in a vernacular way, you have to transcribe it, translate it. So yeah. Next is you are collecting data based on words from a small number of individuals so that the participants' view are obtained. So again, when you are collecting data from the participants for your study, this is where you develop forms called protocols, where example for recording data as like your study proceeds. These forms pose general questions so that the participants can provide answers to the questions that you gave them. Next is analyzing data on words for analyzing data or descriptions of themes using text analysis and interpreting the larger meaning of findings. So, in data analysis, this consists of dividing into groups of sentences, and you call this text segments, and you are determining the meaning of each word sentence rather than using statistics. So you determine what they are saying rather than the statistics or the number of people who answered a specific question, unlike the quantitative. And then you analyze words or pictures to describe the central phenomenon using the study or central phenomenon under the study. Next is you are going to write a report, and it should be flexible, emerging structures, and evaluate criteria, and including researcher subjective flexibility and bias. So unlike the quantitative, it's not biased, it doesn't involve their personal opinions, but qualitative, you can actually put your own understanding or biases if you have bias in your study. So reporting qualitative research is where you employ a wide range of formats to your report and to your studies. Although the overall general form follows a standard steps in the process of research, the sequence of these parts of the research tends to vary on the qualitative report to one another. So their response should be related or correlated to each other. A study may begin with a long personal narrative told in the story form with a more objective scientific, and it should resemble quantitative research. Which such a variability, it is not surprising that the standards for evaluating qualitative research also are flexible.
So once again, good morning everyone. I will be tackling about the similarities and differences between quantitative and qualitative research. So the similarities, both forms of research follow the 6 steps in the process of research. Both quantitative and qualitative data collection may employ similar approaches such as interviews or observation. And also the differences are in the quantitative research, the research problem section is used to direct the types of question or hypothesis as in the study in qualitative research. So the research problem discussion is typically used to establish the importance of the central idea. And also the quantitative approaches use more close-ended approaches in which the researcher identifies set response categories. For example, the strongly agree, strongly disagree, and so forth. The qualitative approaches use more open-ended approaches in which the inquirer asks general question of participants, and the shape of responsibilities is an interview with a teacher. So a qualitative researcher might ask, what does professional development mean to you? So that are um, the researcher must ask to and also in qualitative research, statistics are not used to analyze the data. Instead, the inquirer analyzes words, transcription from interviews, or images or photographs. So, in the quantitative research, the investigator relies on statistical analysis like mathematical analysis of the data, which is typically in numeric form. So, in the similarities and differences between quantitative and qualitative research. So at this point, we may be asking how quantitative research and qualitative research are similar and different. In terms of similarity, both forms of research follow the 6 steps in the process of research. So these differences are apparent in the comparison of the introduction to the quantitative parent involvement study according to Dislandes and Bertrand 2005, and the qualitative mother's trust in school principal study according to Sheldon et al. 2010. And also, it should be mentioned that rather than viewing quantitative and qualitative as two endpoints in a dichotomy, but rather as different points on continuum. Studies may contain some elements of the characteristic of quantitative research and some elements of qualitative research. And so let us continue. How do you choose whether to use a quantitative or a qualitative approach? So we have three factors that are important. First is match your approach to your research problem. Remember that problems best suited for quantitative research are those in which trends or explanation need to be made. For qualitative research, the problems need to be explored to obtain a deep understanding. Second is your approach needs to fit the audience. For the research report, educator write for several audience such as policymaker, faculty and graduate committees, editors and review boards, evaluators of grant proposal, and individuals in schools or educational settings. It is important that the audience is be familiar with the approach used in a study. And the last what it's called the last factor is that are important is it is you need to relate your approach to your personal experience and training. Quantitative research typically has taken some course or training in measurement, statistic, and quantitative data collection, such as experiment, correlational designs, or survey techniques. The qualitative researchers needs experience in field studies in which they practice gather information in a setting and learning the skills of observing or interviewing individuals' coursework or experience in analyzing text data is helpful. And also, as well as in research design such as grounded theory, ethnography, or narrative research, some individuals have experience and training in approaches to research that combine both quantitative and qualitative methods, such as mixed method research or action research. So next is the research design associated with quantitative and qualitative research. So it is not enough to know the steps in the process of research and that quantitative and qualitative procedures differ at each step. So this text will also go into detailed procedures involved in quantitative, qualitative, and combined research. So in the experimental design, also called intervention studies or group comparison studies, are procedures in quantitative research in which the investigator determines whether an activity or materials make a difference in result for participants. You assess this impact by giving one group one set of activities that called an intervention and withholding the set from another group. So next is correlational design. So in some studies, you may be unable to provide an intervention or to assign individuals to groups. So moreover, you focus more on examining the association or relation of one or more variables than in testing the impact of activities or materials. In the correlational design are the procedures in quantitative research in which investigators measure the degree of association or relation between two or more variables using the statistical procedure of correlational analysis. So this degree of association expressed as a number indicates whether the two variables are related or whether one can predict another. To accomplish this, you study a single group of individuals rather than two or more group as in an experiment. So next is survey design. In other form of quantitative research, you may not want to test an activity or materials or may not be interested in the association among variables. Instead, you seek to describe trends in a large population of individuals. So in this case, a survey is a good procedure to use. Survey design are procedures in quantitative research in which you administer a survey or questionnaire to a small group of people called that is called the sample to identify trends and attitudes, opinions, behavior, or characteristic of a large group of people called the population. So next is the grounded theory design. Instead of studying a single group, you might examine a number of individuals who have all experienced an action, interaction, or process. In grounded theory design are a systematic qualitative procedure that researchers use to generate a general explanation. For example, grounded in the views of participants called a grounded theory that explain a process, action, or interaction among people. So the procedure for developing this theory include primarily collecting interview data, developing and relating categories or themes of information, and composing a figure or visual model that portrays the general explanation. In this way, the explanation is grounded in the data from participants. From this explanation, you construct predictive statements about the experience of individuals. So next is the ethnographic design. You may be interested in studying one group of individuals and examining them in the setting where they live and work, and in developing a portrait of how they interact. An ethnographic study is well suited for this purpose. Ethnographic design are qualitative procedure for describing, analyzing, and interpreting a cultural group's shared patterns of behavior, beliefs, and language that develop over time. So, in ethnography, the researcher provides a detailed picture of the culture sharing group, drawing on various sources of information. And the ethnographer also described the group within its setting, explored themes or issues that develop over time as the group interacts, and that details a portrait of the group. So next is the narrative research design. You may not be interested in describing and interpreting group behavior or ideas, or in developing an explanation grounded in the experience of many individuals. Instead, you wish to tell the stories of one or two individuals. The narrative research design are qualitative procedures in which researchers describe the lives of individuals, collect and tell stories about these individuals' lives, and write narratives about their experience. So, in education, these stories often relate to school classroom experience or activities in schools. So next is the mixed methods design. You decide to collect both quantitative data like quantifiable data and the qualitative data is the text or images. So the core argument for a mixed methods design is that the combination of both forms of data provides a better understanding of a research problem than either quantitative or qualitative data by itself. So the mixed method designs are procedures for collecting, analyzing, and mixing both quantitative and qualitative data in a single study or in a multi-phase series of studies. So in this process, you need to decide on the emphasis you will give to each form of data or the priority. It means so which form of data you will collect first, the concurrent or sequential. So how you will mix the data in integrating or connecting. And whether you will use theory to guide the study, the example is the advocacy or social science. So next is the action research design. Like mixed method research, action research design often utilize both quantitative and qualitative data, but they focus more on procedure useful in addressing practical problems in schools in the classroom. The action research design are systematic procedure used by the teacher or other individuals in an educational setting to gather quantitative and qualitative data to address improvements in their educational setting, their teaching, and the learning of their students. And some action research design you seek to address and solve local, practical problems such as a classroom discipline issue for a teacher. In other studies, your objective might be to empower, transform, and emancipate individuals in educational settings. So in the next slide is the institutional review boards. Campus office developed to monitor adherence to these three principles, and office of institutional review boards emerged. Federal funds could be withheld from campuses if research conducted on those campuses did not protect the treatment of participants. Accordingly, on campuses that receive federal funds, educational researchers need to. So next is the important ethical issues in conducting research. So respect for audience and the use of non-discriminatory language are ethical issues that Maria must observe. Like Maria, all educational researchers need to be aware of and anticipate ethical issues in their research, such as needs stems from the research, horrors of treatment of individuals in Nazi Germany in the inappropriate Tuskegee syphilis studies according to Mark and Gamble 2009. From this and other violation of treatment, participants developed federal guidelines for conducting research as announced in the 1978 National Commission for the Protection of Human Subjects on Biomedical and Behavioral Research in its Belmont report according the Department of Health, Education, and Welfare 1978. So the three basic principles of this report involve the benefits of treatment of participants like maximizing good outcomes and minimizing risk. So respect for participants and protecting autonomy and ensuring well-informed voluntary participation and justice like fair distribution of risks and benefits. So next is the professional association. The ethical standards are also available from professional association. Example of professional association that offer helpful guidelines include the American Educational Research Association, the Ethical Standards of America Educational Research Association according to Strike et al. 2002, the Principle of Psychologists in Code of Conduct 2003, the Code of Ethics 1998, and the Joint Committee on Standards for Educational Evaluation according to Program Evaluation Standard adopted November 21, 1980 and amended through September 20, 1995. So according to these guidelines, the individual who participate in a study have certain rights before participating in research. Individuals need to know the purpose and aim of of the study, on how the result will be used, and the likely social consequences the study will have on their lives. They also have the right to refuse to participate in a study and to withdraw at any time. When they participate and provide information, their anonymity is protected and guaranteed by the researcher. So the individuals are not to be offered excessive financial inducement to participate in the projects. So the participant also have the right to gain something from a study, and the researchers need to actively look for ways to give back or reciprocate to participants in a study because the participants have freely provided their time. So next is the ethical practice throughout the research process. So in all steps of the research process, you need to engage in ethical practice. Practicing ethics is a complex matter that involves much more than merely following a set of static guidelines such as those from professional associations or conforming to guidelines from campus institutional review boards. Ethic has become more pervasive idea stretching from the origins of a research study to its final completion and distribution. The ethics should be a primary consideration rather than an afterthought, and it should be at the forefront of the researcher's agenda, according to Hess, Weber, and Levy 2006. Of all the steps in the research process, it does tend to relate closely to the data collection and reporting and distribution of reports than any of the other phase of research. And next is the some ethical issues and data collection. It is important to respect the site in which the research takes place. The Disrespect should be shown by gaining permission before entering a site, by disturbing the site as little as possible during a study, and by viewing oneself as a guest at the place of study. According to Lincoln Public School in Lincoln, Nebraska, provides illustrative guidelines to follow for conducting research with minimal disruption to a school district. Their guideline lists several reasons why a project may not be approved. Disapproved projects are those that take away considerable amounts of instructional time, require large amounts. So next is will be the skills needed to design and conduct research. As a new researcher, you may wonder whether you have the ability to read, evaluate, and actually conduct research. Knowing the process of research, you may say, does not guarantee an educate research study. Certainly, who is new to research? Sure has this concern. Let me set your mind at ease. You have already learned valuable research skills through your life experience. These skills include solving puzzles, employing a long attention span, using a library, and of course, writing out your thoughts. First is solving puzzles. Researchers look at problems as puzzles. To solve this step in the research process are viewed as a series of puzzle pieces that inquire as symbols. You already have skills in solving puzzles. You fit together the debits and credits to balance your checkbook as a parent or prospective parent. You engage in multiple roles during the day that require juggling of different tasks. So these are puzzles that we work out by breaking them down into manageable parts. So next is the lengthening your attention span. Although we generally make time to complete the task we love, our attention span certainly varies from task to task. The process of research involves 6 steps that may a span period of 6 months or more. To read through a journal article and identify each of these steps, for example, requires patience as well as knowledge about what to look for. We all bring attention span of varying lengths to the process of research. The third one is learning to use library resources. So in this step, the research process that requires you to review the literature means spending time in academic library. For most of us, going to the library probably began in grade school with trips to the school. Library engaging research requires spending time with library resources, a process that is facilitated by home computers and internet, and question or articles. Writing exists in all phases of the creative process of planning and conducting research.
So, good morning everyone. I am Maxine Shelley Alfaro and I will be continuing the report. So, let's start. Constructs adopted from the Sharing the Dream Parent Questionnaire by Jones, Gold, Brown, Young, and the Peabody Family School Partnership Lab of Vanderbilt University 2000. So, under this study is the parents' role construction, self-efficacy, perception of teacher invitations, reports of parent practices of involvement, grounded in Hoover, Dempsey, and Sandler's 1995 to 1997 model of the parent involvement process. So, this means that some ideas and questions used in the study were taken from a questionnaire created by a group of researchers at Vanderbilt University. These ideas are about how parents see their role in their child's education, how confident they feel, how they view the teacher's involvement, and what they do to help with their child's schooling. These ideas are based on a model that explains how parents get involved in their child's education, which was developed by Hoover, Dempsey, and Sandler in the 1990s. So basically, the study used some already established ideas to understand how parents are involved their in their child's schooling. Next, parents' perception of student invitations and reports of involvement activities include items from questionnaires designed by Epstein and her colleagues, Epstein, Connors, and Salinas, 1993, and Epstein, Connors, Tandros, Horsey, and Simon, 1996. So this means that some of the questions in the study came from surveys created by Epstein and her team. So these questions focus on how parents see their child's school inviting them to get involved and what activities parents actually do to be involved in their child's education. So the study used questions from these surveys to understand how parents perceive the school's invitations and what actions they take in response. So there are two types of evaluation methods. The first one is classical item analysis, and the second one is factor analysis. So classical item analysis, this method looks at each question individually to see how well it performs. It helps us understand if the questions are clear and if they measure what they're supposed to measure. Let's say we have a questionnaire with questions like, how often do you help your child with homework? And do you attend parent-teacher conferences? We would analyze each question separately to see if they're clear and if they measure what they're supposed to. For example, we might find that a question about homework help is easy to understand, but the one about parent-teacher conferences is confusing because it doesn't specify whether it's asking about past attendance or future intentions. While for the factor analysis, this method looks at how different questions are related to each other. It helps us see if there are underlying patterns or factors in the data. Imagine you have a bunch of different questions on a survey, like how often do you help your child with homework? And do you attend parent-teacher conferences? Factor analysis helps us see if these questions are related to each other or if they measure different things. For example, we might find that questions about helping with homework, attending conferences, and participating in school events all go together because they're about being involved in your child's education. This helps us understand the purpose or goal of what the survey is measuring. Number 6, inclusion criteria for factor interpretation, and under this is the items loaded at least 0.30 on the factor. So let's imagine you're sorting through a bunch of different colors of marbles to see if which ones belong in the blue category. You want to make sure only the marbles that are mostly blue and end up in that category. In our study, we're doing something similar with survey questions. We're trying to group them based on a certain topics like teacher support or student engagement. So for each group, we set a rule. Only the survey questions that are strongly related to that topic get included. When we say items loaded at least 0.30 on the factor, it's like saying we're only picking the survey questions that are mostly about the topic we're studying. It helps us keep our groups focused and organized, just like sorting marbles by color helps you find the blue ones easily. Number 9. Description of constructs. Under that is the parents' role construction, which measures parents' belief in their responsibility to help educate their adolescent. And based on Hoover-Dempsey's 3 types of parent role construction, which means parent-focused, school-focused, and partnership-focused. So imagine we're studying how parents see their role in their child's education. We want to know if they think it's important to help their child with schoolwork. To do this, we ask parents questions like how much do you think parents should be involved in their child's education? Now, Hoover Dempsey, a researcher, talks about 3 ways parents see their role. Some focus more on what they can do at home, parent focus. Others on what happens at school, school focused. And some working together with the school, partnership focused. So in our study, we're looking at these different perspectives to understand how parents think about their role in their child's education. Number 12. Principal axis factor analysis revealed a single factor solution combining parent, school, and partnership focused behaviors. So principal axis factor analysis, a statistical technique was performed on the collected data. This analysis revealed that the 10 items could be grouped together into a single factor. This factor represents the combination of parent, school, and partnership-focused behaviors related to parental involvement in adolescents' education. It suggests that these behaviors are interconnected and contributed to overall parental involvement. And number 13, the construct demonstrated good reliability with a Cronbach's alpha coefficient of 0.72. So the reliability refers to the consistency or stability of a measurement tool. In this case, the construct consisting of 10 items showed good reliability as indicated by a Cronbach's alpha coefficient of 0.72. This coefficient measures the internal consistency of the items, suggesting that they are measuring the same underlying construct reliability. Number 14. Parents responded to items such as their willingness to communicate with school personnel regarding their teenagers' concern. So, to assess parental involvement behaviors, parents participating in the study were asked to respond to specific items. These items likely focused on aspects such as parents' willingness to engage in communication with school personnel regarding their teenagers' concerns. This suggests that effective communication between parents and school staff is considered an important aspect of parental involvement. And lastly, number 15, responses were recorded on a 6-point Likert type scale ranging from disagree very strongly to agree very strongly. In the study, parents' responses to the items were recorded using a 6-point Likert type scale. This scale allowed parents to indicate their level of agreement or disagreement with each item, ranging from disagree very strongly to agree very strongly. This provided a way to quantify and compare parents' perspectives on the behaviors related to parental involvement.